This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. Shalom Aleichem. We continue in the Sefer Devorah. We're up to the 8th and final Middah of Middah Kesser. And as we usually recap, the Middah of Kesser of course is the closest Middah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, the first Middah of Kesser, which is koilel everything, and bear this in mind because the Devorah today is going to say a line that alludes to this as well, and that is this Middah is sort of embarrassed to look at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to turn back, and therefore it's always looking downward in order to be mative to those below him. So a person should be embarrassed, so to speak, to position his head upward and instead emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the position of his head looking downward at those who need hatava. And this Middah encapsulates and reflects Hashem's great anivos, and nothing should interrupt and nothing should prevent someone from always being concerned with those, so to speak, who he's responsible for and who he could care for, and this is the Middah of Anivos. Then secondly, the second aspect of Kesser is emulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu in one's thoughts. One's thoughts should always be occupied with Chesed, Hatava, and Torah, just like Middas HaKesser, which preceded the world, was like Torah Keduma. The third is the aspect of the forehead. One's forehead should always be forbearing, forgiving, showing goodwill, without any kas, without any dinim. So a person should always use their forehead, so to speak, to give off and illuminate feelings of Glatstein and goodwill. The fourth Middah was one's ears. One's ears should be inclined to hear only things which are proper, only truth, nothing disparaging, nothing lowly. Just like in the ears of Hashem, Hashem does not allow the accusations of the Nachash to enter. With one's eyes, one should never gaze on anything immodest, improper, or debased, but rather one's eyes should always be focused on the downtrodden to try to see their pain, see their plight, and do something about it. One's nose should be free of any charoinaf, any anger. One's nose should only be giving off ratzain and chayim, even for those who are not deserving. Then, the last, on Thursday, we learned about one's face. One's face should always be illuminating goodwill and Sefer panam yafais, as the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kiviyachal, is described as always illuminating ar pnei melachayim. There is no atzvas, oiz v'chedva b'mekaymai. Hashem's face, so to speak, is always giving off simcha and hasbaras panam. Okay, so today we begin we learn the final Middah of Kesser, and that is the person's person's piv. How does one emulate in one's peh, the peh ha'elyon? Says the Devorah, lo yotzi ela toiva. With one's mouth, one should emit and bring out and speak out, and only good. Uvegizras amarav, and the subject matter of one's word should be either Torah, words of Torah, v'hafakas ratzain tov tamid, and expressions of goodwill. So this gives a person a lot to talk about. One has so much Torah to speak. One could speak words of goodwill. V'lo yoitzi mipiv davar meguna. One should not let out of his mouth something lowly. In other words, of course not sheker, of course not lashon hara, but even something disparaging. V'loy klala, and not curse. V'loy roigez, and not wrath, v'chas, and anger, klal. V'loy dvarim b'telim, not empty chatter. By the way, I saw the Chidah brings from Reb Chaim Vital that, there's an idea that people say over, but it's usually unattributed. That we know that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man, and man became a living being, lenefesh chaya, vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim, vayhi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, the Targum Onkelos says, l'ruach memalala. Being a living spirit means the ability to speak. So the Chidah brings from Reb Chaim Vital that a person's life is measured by the number of words they have. And when one emits a word, so to speak, they are using up part of their life. And therefore one should not speak even chatter, even empty words. One should be comparable to that mouth on high. In other words, there's some concept that in the Sefer of Kesser, there's some type of symbolic peh, and this peh, it's not silent. In other words, what he's saying, it's not enough to be a shaskan. It's not enough to be just someone who doesn't talk. In other words, it's not sufficient just not to curse and not to speak anger and not to speak disparaging words and not to speak chatter, but one's mouth should constantly be functioning. However, in what capacity should be functioning? V'lo yimna toiv tamid. One should not refrain from using one's mouth for goodness always. So one's mouth should be working. One should have divrei chizuk, divrei chesed, divrei Torah on their lips. V'lchein sarach shelo yechashem meladaber toiva al hakol. One should not be silent from speaking good on everything. One should always have positive words to say about everything. In other words, as we know, the Chafetz Chaim was not a quiet, silent person. One would have thought, of course, he probably didn't say anything. If you can't speak Lashon Hara, Rechila, Sheker, Chanifa, so Klala, then there's not much left else to talk about. If you can't talk Dvarim B'Tim, so what are you supposed to talk about? What are you supposed to do with your mouth? No, the Chafetz Chaim had a lot to say, but his words were Divrei Toiva on everyone and everything. Divrei Torah, ulahoitzi mipiv toiva uvracha tamid. One should emit from his mouth words of goodness and words of blessing always. So, when the mouth was created to be in use. The mouth is a machine, and the Baal Kitzer Shulchan Aruch writes that the procedure of tahara for the Metzora is that he has to bring two birds. One bird he shachts, and one bird he sends out al pnei asada. Now Rashi says, why is his kapara birds? Because since birds tweet, chatter, and are constantly yapping, so the point is we take a bird, we slice it, we slit its neck, and the message is, Mr. Metzora, we should have done this to you, really. So the question, though, that the Mefarshim ask is that, granted, we understand why one bird we shecht, but why one bird do we send out on the al pnei asada and we let it continue to chatter and to talk and to chirp? And the Baal Kitzer Shulchan Aruch says in his Sefer HaPeryain that the remedy for the Baal Lashon Hara is not, okay, let's slit the neck of the bird and now this guy's never going to say another word again. The way for a person to be able to use his mouth properly is not to keep it closed, but rather he should use it to speak proper words. Now, many people, they don't know how to do that. So certainly it is better if they use their lips. First they take their teeth and they very tightly close their mouth. And then just to make sure that nothing else comes out, they also seal their lips. That's for people who don't know how to use the mouth. But that's not the ideal. The ideal is to channel the need to speak good about other people, to give brachos to other people, to speak divrei Torah, and as the Talmud Devorah says, "Ulahoitzi mipiv toiva ubracha tamid," and therefore we tell them like this: there's two types of speech. The bad type of speech, chatter, we take the bird, we slit its neck. In other words, that kind of speech has to end. However, when it comes to divrei Torah, we send the second bird, the second kind of speech, and we say, do your thing. In other words, the Metzora, you weren't using your mouth for toiva. So says the Talmud Devorah, Harei elu shmoina midos toivos. These are 8 good qualities in the head, in the thoughts, in the eyes, in the ears, in the nose, in the forehead, in the face, and in the lips. V'kulan tachas degel ha'anava. All of the above comes under the banner of humility. Using your ear only to hear the good is someone who is a Baal Gaiva. He needs the ego boost of hearing something bad about somebody to give himself a little boost. It is the derech, it is the Middah of Anova that dictates that one should not want to see, hear, or encounter anything the meaning. Shekulan lamala bekesser ba'ivarim ha'elyonim. All of these midas correspond in the sphera of Kesser, in the supernal limbs. When a person wants to get closer to Hashem's elevated attributes, to be comparable to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, liftayach mikayroisav, so that Hashem opens up His channels of bracha to the mankind who lives down here. We know, as we've said many times, that in order to access the midos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of rachamim and chesed, we need to conduct ourselves down here with those midos. So in order to open up those channels, tzarech sheyishtalim b'shnei prakim elu, you need to be perfected in these two prakim, namely Perek Aleph, which talks about the 13 midos harachamim and how we emulate them, and Perek Beis, the 8 ways in which we emulate midas HaKesser. Okay, Rabbi Isai, we'll hold it over here. And Be'ezos Hashem, maybe tomorrow we'll have an executive recap. And we'll continue with when these midas should be employed, because as we're going to see tomorrow, one is not always able to exercise these particular midas. And Be'ezos Hashem, stay tuned. We will see tomorrow. Okay, Rabbi Isai, have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why isn't the forehead part of the face?
Why isn't
the forehead is one place and face is another? And I was wondering why the order is I would say maybe speech is more important than face, the nose and ears. Why is it in this order?
Okay, so the forehead symbolically represents either goodwill or anger. So that's one specific dimension of the face. When we talk about the face, we talk about the smile and the whole illuminating quality of the face. That's what the Talmud Devorah refers to when he talks about panav. Panav refers to maybe the lower half of the face, but it really includes everything. It includes the look that your face gives off. The forehead specifically is relevant to kas or ratzain. And then the mouth is referring to the koyach hadibor. So it's the forehead and the face are somewhat of a different dimension. Okay, Rabbi Isai, shkoyach, have a great day. Okay, kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.